In a world where people are losing their minds, who will be the voice of sanity, of logic, of rationale, of morality and truth? This podcast is looking for like-minded people to stand up to the insane and be real. The Recovery Atheist podcast is calling you to step forward and be counted. Welcome to the voice of change. Welcome to the Recovery Atheist podcast.
It's normal to expect that we're always going to, almost by nature, actively seek out our own happiness, especially in two big areas of potential satisfaction: relationships and careers. So it's odd and not a little unnerving to discover just how often some of us appear to act as if we were deliberately out to ruin our chances of getting what we are on the surface convinced that we're really after. When going on dates with candidates we like the sound of, we may suddenly lapse into unnecessarily opinionated or antagonistic behavior.
Hello?
Hi, Helen. What are you doing Friday night?
Yes? Yes? Who is this?
Why, it's Bill. Bill Jenkins.
No, Bill didn't do very well.
When we had no difficulty being charming with the types we weren't so keen on. Or in relationships, we may drive our partners to distraction through repeated, unwarranted accusations or angry explosions, as if we were somehow willing to bring on the sad day when, exhausted and frustrated, our loved ones would be forced to walk away, still sympathetic but unable to take so much drama. And similarly, we could destroy our chances of promotion at work when out of the blue, after lots of promising years, we get strident with our managers or on several occasions fail to hand in really important reports in time for meetings. Such behaviour can't be explained away as mere bad luck. It deserves a stronger, more intentional term. This is self-sabotage. What could possibly explain such destructiveness? In large part, how plain unnerving happiness can sometimes feel to us. Though happiness is of course what we all fundamentally want, for many of us it isn't really what we know. We grew up in and learnt to make our peace with far darker scenarios. The prospect of happiness, when it in the end appears, can therefore seem a bit counterintuitive and not a little bit frightening. It isn't what we've come to expect, and it doesn't feel like home. We may prefer to choose what's comfortingly familiar, even if it's difficult, over what is alienatingly fulfilling or good. Getting what we want can feel unbearably risky. It puts us at the mercy of fate. We open ourselves up to hope and the subsequent possibility of loss. Self-sabotage may leave us sad, but at least safely, blessedly in control. It can be useful to keep the concept of self-sabotage in mind when interpreting our and others' odder behaviour. We should start to get suspicious when we catch ourselves pulling off erratic performances around people we deep down really like or need to impress. Furthermore, faced with certain kinds of viciousness and unreliability in others, we should dare to imagine that things are perhaps not quite as they seem. We might have on our hands not a nasty, malevolent opponent, but an almost touchingly wounded self-saboteur, who chiefly deserves a little patience and should gently be coaxed out of doing themselves further harm. We should come to terms with and help others to see just how hard and unnerving it can sometimes be to get close to some of the things we truly want.
Well, hello everybody out there in Podcast Nation. I want to thank you for coming on and listening to another episode of the Recovery Atheist podcast. How's everybody doing out there? Hope you're doing well. I hope I find you well. Like I said, I'm going to be bringing forth the content. So back-to-back nights, I am doing a podcast episode. I just did one last night on the 6th step from an atheist perspective. Tonight I wanted to talk about something that happens a lot. And it's not even just to people that are in recovery, because It definitely happens to us in recovery. I'm talking about to anyone. It doesn't matter who it is, in or out of recovery, just people in life in general. And you just watched and listened to the audio of that and video of that of self-sabotage. Now, self-sabotage is something that I know well. It is something that I am very good at doing. It is something that I wish I wasn't, but it happens more than not. For me, when it happens the most, it happens when I am pretty much, things are going great. Say, right now. Got a year sober today. I'm back working in my profession as a mental health practitioner. I am a house manager, and that's going well. Life in general is going really, really well. This is usually where I start overthinking things of when is the shoe going to drop? When is finally all of this, when is the rug going to be pulled out from underneath me? And I struggle with it. Why? Some of that has to do with self-confidence and self-esteem. Some of that has to do with a conditioning, a conditioned learning of where things have happened like that. And so I just assume and expect and catastrophize that it is going to happen. It is a big deal. It is debilitating. It is something that will cause you to destroy everything that you have in your life. And this goes for everybody. Don't have to have an addiction to do this. So you start affecting your life at home, your family life, your relationships, your work relationships, your finances, everything. You start sabotaging it. So, I wanted to talk about that today because it is a very important subject in life in general, but definitely when it comes to recovery, which is what I do as the Recovery Atheist, is talk about topics that can be a hardship or something that is difficult for people who are in recovery. So self-sabotage, what is it? It's when we actively or passively even take steps to prevent ourselves from reaching our goals, from having things in our lives that we want. We think that it's either too good to be true, and so we find a way to say, no, this can't be real, this can't be right. I'm afraid of it, I'm fearful of it, so I'm going to destroy it. And we can do it subconsciously. We don't even have to necessarily be aware that we're even doing it. We can even be passively doing it. So some of the questions that we have when we go through that is, why do I keep doing this? And how does this keep happening to me? We start second guessing ourselves. We start noticing the same patterns, the same vicious cycle that's happening over and over and over again. And we're curious why. Why are we going through this over and over and over again? Okay, for addicts, people in recovery, it makes a lot of sense. This is what we do. Think about it when you are in your using situations or you're fresh in recovery. I've done it, I don't know how many times, where I'm fresh in recovery and something happens to where right away I just assume the worst and I start going back into that self-sabotaging behavior. I lose my job, I lose my relationships, I lose myself. So what does it look like? Well, for me, this first one is huge. Blaming others. I start blaming everyone around me for the reasons why I'm going through the issues that I'm going through. I start saying that, well, if you wouldn't have done this, I wouldn't have had to do this. If you wouldn't have withdrawn from me in a relationship, then I wouldn't have had to do this to try to deal with the emotions I was having because of that. If you would have treated me right on the job, then I wouldn't have reacted the way I did and lashed out at you. It's your fault for my behavior. You forced me to have to react this way. Okay? These are things that we use to blame others. And by doing that, it allows us to be able then to have the excuse of, well, fine, this gives me a reason to go drink. This gives me a reason to go use. No, it doesn't. You're looking for a way to destroy yourself. Again, this is self-sabotage. You start giving up trying something because it's too hard, or because you lack the self-confidence to think that you can achieve it. Okay, and I'll use me as an example. I always want to use me and be authentic and talk from my experience. So last year at this time, if you would have told me where I'm at today, I would have said there's no way that would be the case. The idea at that point of me being able to be sober a year, to work as a mental health practitioner and be back in my career instead of working some dead-end job that I don't want to do, to be house managing a sober living home, to be able to get my driver's license back. Now, I would have told you there's no way. Usually in past experiences for me, I wouldn't even have gotten this far. I would have somewhere along the line self-sabotaged and went and relapsed or went and destroyed these things. This time around for me, it's different. I'm realizing that those are things that I do to try to put myself back into that reusing behavior. And when I do that, it doesn't do any good for me. I need to change my thought process. We talked about it tonight. We had our in-house AA meeting here at the Sober Living Home, and so tonight we were reading the doctor's opinion. And it talks about in there, it's got one of my favorite paragraphs in the entire book, where it talks about being restless, irritable, and discontented, and that with the ease of a few drinks, that goes away. And that this whole process, if we're going to do it, we need a complete psychic change to be able to do it, which means just a complete overall overhaul of the way we think, the way we do things. And that is what I've had to do for myself. I've had to completely understand that and notice, okay, acknowledge when I'm getting restless, irritable, and discontent, that is part of my addiction, part of my disease, and that I have to look at it and have a psychic change to think differently about that, to receive the ease and comfort when I'm feeling that way, because alcohol is not an option. And it definitely was not an answer. It only caused things to get worse. So I might have felt that ease and comfort maybe initially when it first would start drinking for a very short temporary amount of time, but then after, and it was like a couple hours of doing it, that after that things were not comfortable anymore, and the shame and the guilt and the remorse and the hatred for myself and all that started to come back in, and I was irritable, restless, and discontented again, even with the booze. How about procrastination? Start putting things off that you really shouldn't. One of those, and I've talked about it before in previous podcasts, is about finishing the fourth step. I see it so many times with people who are new in recovery. They get to the fourth step with their sponsor, and then they start procrastinating. They start slowing down on it, or they come to a complete standstill, and they never get off step 4. Some of it is they have fear of having to tell somebody else. Maybe they don't. A lot of them that I hear all the time is they don't feel like they can trust their sponsor to tell it, so I'll tell a priest or whatever. They're so concerned about somebody else knowing their secrets, when the truth is usually the sponsor. Like when I told my sponsor Isaac about my 4-step issues, none of what I said to him was anything he hasn't heard before or done. It was not a shock to him. It was not something of, oh my, how horrible of a person you are for doing that. He completely understood. But they're afraid of that. They're afraid that they'll be judged. And their pride gets in the way of that. And they start procrastinating. The other reason why they would do that is because they know that when you get through step 4 into 5 and move on into 6 and 7 and forward in the steps, you make a decision that you're not going to drink anymore. You're not going to use it anymore. You have to give it up. You can't have any more reservations with it. Up to step 4, if you don't complete a step 4, you can still say you're fighting with step 1 through 3 and go back out and use. Again, it gives you a reason to drink or use. And then again, you go to blaming then. Well, I blame it that I have to share my secrets with someone else. That's why I didn't complete the step 4 step, and why I went back out. You start bringing up the blames. And again, you give up on trying something hard because the 4th step is hard. You've got to be honest with yourself and admit things you don't want to admit about yourself, so you get an understanding of who you are, so you can make change. I get it. It's hard. You start picking fights with your friends, family, maybe your relationships, your partners, to push them away. Now, this is something I have a lot of experience in, okay? I've been married 3 times, divorced 3 times. I've had numerous fiancés, and what I do is I pull away from them and push them away because I don't want them getting too close to me to see who I truly am, and I also don't want them to see me for who I am, so I won't hurt them. That if I push them away, I keep them from getting hurt. I don't want them, and because I've also been hurt so much by letting people get intimate with me and close to me, that I don't want to let them in because they'll probably hurt me. A learned condition. A conditioned learning of this is what I've had for experiences in the past. Nothing is telling me it's going to be any different. So then I do that. I push away. I pick fights. I do things to push people away from me, jobs away from me, because I just expect the job to fire me. They don't like me. Why would they want me working for them? Of course they're going to fire me. So then I start being a dick at work. I start being a horrible employee. That's my experience for me. You start dating people that are not healthy, that you shouldn't be dating. It's not right for you. Oh man, how many of those do I have? I always pick the sickest ones. I always pick, and sick wants to be with sick. So I'm sick as it is, and so what do? I look for someone who is as sick as I am, if not worse. Usually worse, so I can sit there and be like, see, I'm not as bad as them. And then that way, when they do things to me that are upsetting and horrible, I can sit there and say, well, it caused me to go out and drink because of their behavior. See how that works? Gives me a reason. You start having trouble stating your needs. Okay, you need help in this. You can't do this alone. In recovery, you cannot work recovery without help of others, without guidance from others. It's just not possible. Sorry, if you want to disagree with me, you go ahead. But I've got lots of experience in this and seeing other people as well and clients I have worked with to know that if you're not able to ask for help and get outside of your comfort zone that way, you will not recover. And a lot of that is you're not willing to open your mouth and state what your needs are. What are you needing help with? What are your weaknesses, your strengths? Where areas in your life do you need help with? If you can't do that, nobody else is going to know how to help you. You can't do this on your own. You need other people in your life to help you. And then, big one for me, putting yourself down. That's self-talk. Anybody who listens to my show, do you deal with any self-talk? Now, self-talk can be both positive and negative, I guess. But I'm so used to doing the negative self-talk. I make a mistake and I'm like, oh, stupid idiot. Stupid fucking idiot. Look at what you did. You can't do anything right. This isn't going to work, Del. You're just going to fall on your face like you do every other time. What's going to be any different? You're a loser. Nobody likes you. You're not worthy of having people like you or want to spend time with you. Just look at you. You're a mess. You're despicable. You're a horrible person. Now, these are things that I would say to myself constantly. Even today, I have to notice it. Even today, I don't struggle with it as much, but I have to notice when I start having those defeated words that I'm telling myself, that negative self-talk, and look at it and go, is any of this justified? Is any of this valid? Is any of this true? If it's not, you need to let it go and realize, again, this is just that self-sabotage trying to take you back down again. We're better than that. Okay? If you think right now as you're listening to me that you have no worth, I'm telling you right now you do. Tons of worth. You have something to offer. And I'm here to tell you that. And I know there's other people in your life that would say the same thing. So when you hear that, when you hear those negative thoughts coming into your head and you start talking to yourself that way, find a way to turn that off. Find a way to go in a different direction with it and realize it's not true. It's not valid. It's lies. So what causes it? What causes you to deal with self-sabotage? What causes you to have to go through it, right? Is it a mental health diagnosis? Is it something to do with, well, let's talk about it. First off, a lot of times it's a learned behavior in childhood. Now, I love my parents. Love them dearly. Were they perfect in the way they raised me and perfect parents? No, they weren't. To this day, I still, if someone says they had perfect parents or their parents were perfect, I don't believe it. Okay, because parents make mistakes. They're human like everybody else, so they make mistakes. So I would, expect them not to be perfect. I don't think perfection is attainable. I just don't. Not as humans. Okay? So they made some choices in how they raised me. They made some decisions, and some bad ones, in how to raise me. Now, I forgive them for that. They were human. I was their only child that they raised, so they made mistakes along the way, and we're going off previous learning of how their parents taught them. And I get it. I get that. But I was raised with a lot of shame. Being from a religious family and living in a religious home with a dad as a minister, a pastor of a church, being a PK, a preacher's kid, you were held to a different standard. I was expected to be an adult a lot sooner than I should have. When you're 12 years old and they want you to sit in the first two rows and sit there like an adult in big boy church, and not make mistakes and not experiment and not learn from your mistakes, and don't be curious. Don't just do what we tell you and stay in line. No. That's not how it works for a child. But that was what I was raised in, and if I didn't fall within those guidelines that way, then I was shamed. was punished for it. And that's what they knew. And again, I'm 45 now. It's not still in control of my life anymore. Okay? But it is a learned behavior. Dealing with shame, dealing with self-talk, dealing with perfection. I need to have perfection. I'm a perfectionist, and I'm working on that every day. We talked about in Step 6 podcast about character, defects of character. That's one of mine, is perfectionism. I want to have things be perfect. That's not the way life works. As a human, there's no way for me to be able to do that. Past relationship dynamics. Again, speaking about myself, with past marriages and divorces and the harm and the hurt that happened both from me to her and her to me, those dynamics caused me to have feelings of self-sabotage when it comes to having personal relationships and the intimacy that I have with them. I'm going to hurt you before you hurt me. Now, that's a toxic way of having a relationship, but that's what I've had. Now, when I look at it, and I've said this to my therapists and stuff, and counselors and treatment, is I don't know if I've ever truly had a fully healthy relationship. I'm developing them now, like with my sponsor, the guys in the house here that I manage, people at work, my parents. I'm learning how to have healthy relationships now. But up until this point, I don't know if I've ever truly had a healthy relationship. There was toxicity at some point with it, and a lot of that has to do from the experiences I've had in past relationships and the pain I've had from it, the hurt, the harm. Fear of failure. That's a huge one, especially in recovery. Okay, I'm screwed. Okay, I am completely fucked when it comes to this spot, because when you go through 4-step, you list your resentments, and then your fears, and then your sex inventory, right? And so when you get to fears, I'm listing my fears. I have a fear of success and a fear of failure. I am fucked on both ways. And if you do that together, what does it come to? 1, fear of success, fear of failure, comes to the L, loser. Okay? I mean, that's what it has been for me, that because of that fear, it has caused me to get fucked both ways. I either am scared because things are going successful, when is the shoe going to drop, or I'm fearing failure because I don't have any security when that happens. So fear of failure is definitely a way of self-sabotage, or a fear of success can be that way as well. You don't want to fail and be embarrassed. So you decide to do it yourself. You don't want somebody else to see it, so you'll self-sabotage to get yourself out of the situation so they don't see you failing. You don't want them to see you vulnerable. That's a huge one. And it will take you down every single time if you allow it. And then the last one, again, is one of my problems I have as well, is a need for control. I need to control everything. I am a control just extremist when it comes to things in my life. I want to control all the pieces. It says in the big book that we're like a director controlling the actors and putting them all in the place that we want them, and they're not doing what they want us to, what we're wanting them to do, and so we lose control. I believe it like a chessboard. I want the person I'm playing chess with to move all the pieces the way I want them to move, so I can move my pieces in my mind the way I want to move them to put them in checkmate. Okay, so I am constantly like a chess player looking ahead of all these relationships I have and work and everything, and thinking about what pieces you're going to move or what you're going to do, so I can have my pieces ready to go, my things in my life ready to go, to counteract what you're doing, because obviously everything that you're doing is trying to hurt me. And so I try to control the situation so you don't get the opportunity to do that. And the more and more we go through that, and the more and more we can't control the situation, the more and more we lose our fucking minds. We lose it. And the only thing that we know in that situation, at least for me as an alcoholic, I'll talk about my experience, is get a fucking hotel room, get a fucking bottle of vodka, and just dive into the bottle. Because I do not do well when I'm not in control. Today, every day I wake up and I go out in life, I just admit it, Del, you're not in control. I can control what I can do within my little area and some of the decisions I make, but there is so many things, probably 75-80% of the things that happen to me in my life is out of my fucking control. I can't control it. I can't force it to go the way I want it. What's going to happen at work is going to happen regardless of whether or not I think it should or not. And my job is a beautiful example of that. When I come in every day, I never know what's going to happen. That's what's actually kind of cool about my job, is every day is different. You never know what you're going to deal with a client. You never know what you're going to run into, what problems you're going to have. None of that. Who's going to be referred to you to deal with, what their mental health status is, are they suicidal, all of that stuff. You never know what you're going to run into. So it helps me because when I'm at that job, I can only control what I can, which means if I have a new intake coming in, is just doing the intakes with them, getting them comfortable, letting them know that they're in a safe place and that we're here to help and that I'm here for them, I'm in their corner. But outside of that, whatever behavior they decide to do or what behavior the other clients in the facility decide to do, the behaviors of the other counselors and what decisions they decide to make, the other facilitators, none of that I can control. So when I go in there, it's like, yeah, it is what it is. I'll control what I can. Okay? And it is all of this last year of being in recovery, all of this is me learning that you're not in control, though. Deal with what you can and leave the rest. The rest will work out the way they're supposed to, and just take each situation as it comes to me to where I can control it. So if it's out of my control and eventually comes into my area to where I can't control it, then fine, we'll figure out how to control it at that time. But lots of stuff in my life, I just have to sit back and roll with it. And that is so fucking hard for someone in recovery, to just roll with it, to just let it go. We're not programmed that way. We are not programmed to just be like, just throw our hands up and be like, it is what it is. We want things to be the way we fucking want it. And we don't care whether or not you like it or not. If we don't have it the way we want it, we are restless, irritable, and discontent, and I'm going to blame you because you're not allowing me to control the situation, and I'm going to go fucking use. So fuck you. Sound familiar? I know there's people out there listening to me right now that know exactly what the fuck I'm talking about. They hear themselves in it. So, what do we do to try to overcome these things? What can we do? And remember, I'm still learning this too, just as much as you are. I, by no means, have all this figured out. Every day, I'm learning more and more and just trying to get better and better with some of these issues. Well, first off, you need to identify the behaviors. You need to acknowledge it. You need to see the behaviors. You need to be open to it. And if you need to be open to somebody else pointing them out to you. It's one thing if it's coming from someone who you know has a dislike for you, has always been hurtful to you. But when you've got good friends, 5, 6 good friends, seeing it, talking to you about it, and you know they care about you and they're only telling you because they want you to be good, be healthy, and be happy in life, you might need to take a look at those behaviors. If there's smoke, there has to be fire. Smoke doesn't happen without fire. Okay? Even this vape. You don't see the fire when I do it. But there's heat in there, heating up this vape, heating up this juice. to cause the vapor to happen. It's not smoke, it's water vapor, but still there has to be heat to be able to do it. So if there is smoke happening, if people are saying something about something that you're doing, and it's from somebody who cares about you, that you trust and respect, then guess what? There's got to be some validity to it. There's got to be some truth to it. You need to look at it. That's a huge thing. Find out what those behaviors are. If you need to, fucking write it down. Come back to it. What behaviors do I show when I am feeling this way? That way, the more and more you look at that piece of paper, and the more and more you see the behaviors, the more practice you get, the more you start realizing what you need to do to change those behaviors. Learn what sets you off. What sets these feelings off? What triggers you? Practice getting comfortable with failure. You're not going to win every day. In sports, I love using sports analogies this way, but in sports, nobody wins every game. Okay, I use the football analogy all the time. There's been only one team in the NFL that's ever been perfect. That was the 1972 Miami Dolphins. They went on to win the Super Bowl and had a perfect season. One other team had a shot at it, which was New England. They went 18-1 that year, went to the Super Bowl, lost to the Giants. But the truth is most teams in the NFL don't win Super Bowls without having losses. Okay, I'll use the example of Tampa Bay this year. I wish I could use the example of Green Bay, because we ended up losing to Tampa Bay. If we would have won the Super Bowl instead, I would have talked about Green Bay and the losses they had earlier in the year. But Tampa Bay, at one point earlier in the year this last season, people said they were out of sorts, that Tom Brady and Bruce Arians, the coach, were not on the same page, that this team looked out of sorts. It looked like a team that would barely, if they were lucky, maybe make the playoffs, but there was a chance they wouldn't make the playoffs. And then they went into that Green Bay game and destroyed Green Bay, and they started getting better. The thing is with loss, you're able to look at the situation of why you lost, make changes, practice those changes, and get better the next situation that happens. And that's football. They practice it, they look at the game film, see how they made mistakes, come back to it later in the next game, and get better at executing their game plan. Well, that's the same with us in this situation. We have to practice when we fail, of what we did wrong, to learn what we need to do right to make it better next time. It's okay to fail. It's okay to have things not go the way you wanted it. My last employment had issues with management. Had to file a grievance. Felt like, they were really making my life difficult since I filed that grievance. And I had to make a choice. I could have sat there and forced them to eventually let me go and try to get on unemployment. I didn't feel that that was right. Not when I had other jobs that were wanting me to start working, including this mental health practitioner position that I have. So I had to make a choice to just accept that this did not work, that this job did not work out. There was some successes, but in the end, leaving was, the whole situation kind of failed. It didn't work out the way that I expected it to or wanted it to, and I think neither did it for them. And I had to learn from it and go, okay, this is what happened. This is the situation and the relationships I've had, and I need to carry it into the next situation so I don't repeat those same mistakes. That's what we need to do. Accept failure. It's going to happen. There's nothing we can do about it. How can we get stronger from it to have more success? That's what matters. You need to talk about it, talk about with others when you start feeling those feelings of self-sabotage, those feelings of self-talk and negative talk, and start doing things and behaviors that are not good for you and your recovery. You need to talk with somebody about it. That's why you have a sponsor. That's why you have friends in the community, in the sober community to go to. You have family members. You need to talk with someone, a therapist. That really is huge. I have that written down here is, what to do for seeking help, and that's therapy. My therapist is huge for me. I need to have it. I like it. I only do it like every 3 weeks. At least once a month I meet with her, but being able to talk out my issues and get an idea of where my thought process is at and whether or not they're correct or not. They're valid when I'm thinking. And so when I talked about my job situation to her, the last job that I left, even though it did not work out the way I wanted and it kind of felt like I failed in the situation, I made the right choice. I was thinking correctly and made the right choice to move on and to find something that was more satisfying for me in the situation, which it is now. Okay? So because of that, I don't feel I necessarily failed. I think I grew. I had growth. And that's what matters. And then finally, start identifying what you want. What are you wanting? When you're feeling these feelings, something is not going the way that you want it to go, correct? And you can't always control it, but the things you can control, what are things that if you're not happy about a situation, what are things that you can do to make it go in the direction that you want it to go? So for me, the job situation, I wasn't happy with the situation, so what did I do? I looked for options. I started realizing that other places wanted me as an employee, and I started realizing I could get into areas that I really wanted and was interested in getting back into, like mental health practicing, doing all that and helping people with mental health issues. I started realizing that was an option. Well, Del, do you want it? Yes, I do. So what do you have to do to get there? Well, the number one thing is I had to let go of the job I was in. Regardless of whether or not I felt like I was giving the job up or I was running from the situation, no, it was just time. I was going to go out on my terms, not on theirs. And I felt like my time there had run its course, that it had served the purpose. It was my first job after moving here to Duluth to help me be able to pay rent and get finances together, but it had run its course. It had served its purpose for the time I was working there. It was time to move on. It was not going to be a career job for me. So it was time to move on, regardless of how it went down. And because of that choice, even though I had to work on it and grow from it, the situation I'm in today is exactly what I'm looking for and what I want. And you can have the same. So, self-sabotage. It can be so harmful to us. It can paralyze us. It can take things away from us and destroy things in our lives that we don't want destroyed. Today we went over a few things on what it looks like, what causes it, and how to overcome it. Every single day we should be striving toward finding ways to be better, striving ways to be better humans, our better selves, striving to have growth with some of these character defects and these flaws, these weaknesses that we have, and turn them into strengths. We should be doing that. And so I challenge you today that when it comes to self-sabotage, look at what we talked about in this podcast and see what you can do to put it more into a positive light, to where you can learn and grow from it and become a better human today, a better version of yourself. I know that's what I'm trying to do. I hope that's what you're trying to do. Before we go to the last little audio and video I have at the end of this, just want to say thank you for your support and for being a part of this podcast that I have, and for being a fan of the Recovery Atheist podcast. You can find me at the recoveryatheist@gmail.com if you ever want to email me to talk to me about any questions you might have or topics you're interested in. You can find me on Facebook under Del Bacon. I have a group on there called the Recovery Atheist group through Facebook that you can join and get downloads and everything like that you're looking forward to. Even talk to me. I have shirts that you're able to get in both extra large and 2X sizes. You can find me on the YouTube channel, The Recovery Atheist, where all my videos are posted. Have a lot of them. They're getting better and better each time, getting more polished. I'm doing a lot more editing with them. They're getting a lot more professional looking, which I'm very excited to be able to present to you and have be available for you. You can find me on many different platforms, iHeartRadio, Pandora, Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts. Talk to Alexa. Say, hey, Alexa, play the Recovery Atheist podcast, and she'll do it. Take me on the go when you're on the go, wherever you go. Would love to have you do that. And share me with anyone who, you think might need some help in this area, that my show would be something that could be influential and a help to them in their life. I would really appreciate if you could do that for me. Again, thank you for joining me in this episode dealing with self-sabotage. I'm going to end this out with a video and audio, depending on what you're watching, video or listening to the podcast audioly. It is a guy who I have actually gotten to speak to and talked about atheism and recovery and what it meant to him, or how he looks at it for his point of view. I am a huge fan of his. I'm a huge fan of his books. I've read them all. And he's very influential to me when it comes to my recovery. He's a little bit out there spiritually, a little bit more than what I normally go with. But he is very smart and very educated when it comes to the experiences he had as a drug addict, an alcoholic, sex addict, food addict. Pretty much everything. He calls himself an everything addict. And I'm talking about Russell Brand. So enjoy this little segment I have at the end. And I can't wait to see you the next podcast. Enjoy. Peace out.
How are you going to stop self-sabotaging? How are we going to stop self-sabotaging ourselves together? We've got to stop this self-sabotage. What causes self-sabotage? I suppose it must be a latent, unexpressed, unexamined, unrealized belief that you're not good enough and that you're not worthy of success, whether that's in the field of relationship, education, personal development, profession. And self-sabotage in my own life, because let me tell you, I've been a self-saboteur master. These are my experiences of self-sabotage. I've had the same pattern my whole life when I think about it. There was times where I was really, really popular at school, then so unpopular they'd had to just throw me right out of the school. It's happened just several times in my professional life as well, like sort of chaos and sort of excitement, and then madness and destruction. Now, I think what brings it about in me is a lack of trust in people and a lack of belief in myself. The reason that I'm an ardent supporter and evangelist for the 12-step technique of self-awakening is that it's a program for living. People say, I don't want a program, but we already have a program. If you're experiencing a lot of self-sabotage, that will be coming from your embedded programming, the programming of your family, the programming of your class and gender and sex and race and or economic background. All of this programming realizes itself through us. Now, let's say if you self-sabotage in a relationship, that could be through being unfaithful or criticizing, or it could be from getting too clingy too quickly, all of that kind of stuff. I would say in the area of relationship, it's about projection and attachment to an external, in this case, person, instead of a kind of remedying of the inner malady. What I mean to say is this self-sabotage must be that I don't like myself, I don't think I'm worthy of success. If I don't address that, then I will develop a pattern of self-sabotage in the world of relationships or in the world of my work. How I stop self-sabotage is these very, very clear techniques. One, I really watch my thinking. I try not to forget that I am not my thinking. Two, I surround myself with people that are further down the spiritual path than me. I find mentors and I listen to them. For example, what about Michael Beckwith from the Agape Church, who said, you have to break your vow to mediocrity. That's good, isn't it? If you think about it, how I experience my own mediocrity is say if I'm about to be critical or overly dependent on my wife, I sort of feel it rise up. I think, this is part of your mediocrity to do this. See if you can let go of it. Or if that's where I suppose have problems, being critical and blaming. That's an area where I venture towards self-sabotage, because I foul the arena of my life. I foul the environment of my life. Sorry about the use of the word foul there, it's a bit disgusting, isn't it? But what I mean to say is, like, we live in these relationships, and if I don't treat people properly and correctly, then it's, it all comes back at us. Stuff that we used to think of as spiritual is kind of can be seen as pretty rational. Kindness and love, forget the concept of karma. You're just creating surfaces around yourself that are bearing the sheen of your adulation. The way to stop self-sabotage is to address what's behind it. Something in you is trying to communicate with you. Something is not being heard, some inner voice. If you address the self-esteem issues, the purpose issues, the behavioural and relationship issues, firstly with yourself, with other experts, sometimes in support groups, and with a declared objective and a willingness to bear witness to yourself, to stay awake and stay aware when those behaviours fire up. I still have all of the patterns that I've always had, the patterns of self-destruction, the patterns of self-obsession, the patterns of over-reliance on others. But now, because I've been given and taught a lot of spiritual techniques, when the old engine fires up, I can sort of see it, like, oh, I'm about to do that thing. In the past, I used to not see it. I used to sort of feel it. I used to feel the energy rise up in me of like, oh, I'm going to tell someone to f off or something mad or cause a load of chaos. Then I'd sort of enjoy yielding to it, like enjoy the sort of feeling of being flooded by madness. And then it would only be, I'd sort of come round like about 24 hours later and go, oh no, shit, I've ruined that job. Oh, bollocks. I remember walking out of a photo shoot once for some sort of cool magazine in New York. It was so cool, I can't even remember it. But I'm not even being sarcastic. It was too cool to stay in my mind. There was a lot of, I don't know, everyone was very thin. Anyway, like, I was doing this photo shoot. I goes, I want to leave by 5. In fact, I'm giving myself a 5 p.m. cut-off, right? It was in the meatpacking district of New York. That was, if it's not cool now, it was cool then. And everyone was like, no, we need longer than that to shoot these multiple setups. I was doing the cover of this magazine or whatever. And I just went, I ain't doing it, I'm going. And I remember the atmosphere of everyone I work with and all the people on the shoot, the sort of feelings of like, sort of the bad taste and sort of dismay and sort of disappointment. But I'm going to try not to do things like that anymore. I was self-sabotaging, because this is what I thought. I was like, if they really want me on that magazine, they'll just do whatever I want. And they just went, no, forget it then, man. And then I just wasn't in that magazine. But look, there are more important things to life than being in magazines. Almost everything in life is more important than being in magazines. But the fact is that I didn't, this was 10 years ago, but I didn't know how to behave then. Nowadays, I think I would either, well, probably I wouldn't go to the shoot in the first place, wouldn't agree to do it. But once you have agreed to do it, well, I guess you've got to behave differently. So, self-sabotage, watch your patterns, find mentors, develop a program. These are just some of the things you can do to change you. Don't see the self-sabotage as a negative thing. See it as an inner voice waiting to be heard. There is wisdom in this information.
Thank you for listening to the Recovery Atheist podcast. It's now up to you. What will you do with what you've heard? How will you use it? I challenge you not to stay silent. Be heard. Be real. Be different.